Hey, what's happening, guys? As promised yesterday, I have the brass wool cleaning stuff and a soldering kit, and we'll make a little video here and see what's what. So this is the Hakko 599B tip cleaner. No water required, will not reduce tip temperature. Cleaning the wire. There might be a small amount of white powder in the bag. Okay, so there is flux already in this stuff, so that's good. Remove any residual solder from the tip surface by thrusting the tip into the cleaning wire. Do not wipe the tip. This action may cause dangerous splatter. Okay. So here it is, and it appears to be in a baggie. Uh-oh. Kind of pulled some of it loose there, didn't I? Okay. So we've got that there, and then, oh well, be able to see that. There's our soldering iron, and of course, there's our sponge. So we've got all that good stuff there. And we have our soldering kit. So this is from Elenco, and it's Solder Practice Kit SP1A. There's a parts list, some instructions, a little bit of instructions on how to solder. The funny thing is, I have no idea what this kit really does. Okay, here we go. The Solder Practice Kit consists of a circuit oscillating at 1 Hertz. The oscillator consists of 2 transistors, Q1 and Q2. Resistors R1 to R11, capacitors C1 and C2. This configure is known as a multi-vibrator circuit. Oh, it makes a European siren sound. Okay. So, let's see what's in the bag here. This, I can tell you, is going to be discarded. Lead-free solder, not even once. Some wire, sprecher, miscellaneous components. Oh, will you look at that? Pre-labeled resistors, so I don't even have to figure out which one's which. And our board, very nicely done. Okay, let me get set up and we'll put this thing together. I'll tell you, I wish all kits came like this. This is just fantastic. So we'll start with R3, which is a 68 ohm resistor. And just got to figure out where she goes, right? Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be real slow, and this is going to take all day. We're just going to get a couple of these in here. Next up is R1. Like I said, we're just going to get a couple of these in here. Just straightening the legs from where they had them bent around the card. And once they're all in, we'll solder them up. And we'll see how it does. So I'm just going to install the rest of these resistors into the circuit board, and then we'll come back and solder everything. Okay, all the resistors are in the board. We'll just bend these legs out. So that they stay put, and then we'll solder them in. Okay, everything's ready to solder. I've got my iron cleaned off, and we'll be using MG Chemicals 6040 solder. It's catalog number 4895-227G. So I always start off with just a slight bit of solder on the tip, helps with the thermal transfer. And then you apply the iron to the pad, heat everything up, apply the solder to the joint, let it flow, and remove both. Oh, that's a big pad. Okay, so there's our first one. I'm going to start with my traditional sponge. Couple wipes, clean it off. Everything is clean. Now let's move on and do another one. Again, always just a slight bit of solder for the thermal transfer. Solder this joint here. And now this time I will use the cleaner, which it says to stab the iron in. Okay. Solder up another joint here. And I'll use the Hako once again. The iron is very clean. And of course, I can see the benefit here is that the temperature does not go down. So we'll solder up another joint. All right, this time I'm going to use the sponge. My iron doesn't want to come clean now. Well, you guys can see that. You know what? I may already be sold on this brass wool type stuff. I mean, obviously the one benefit is that you don't have to cool down your tip. Or, I mean, obviously I knew that coming in here, but I always thought to myself, well, that's not really a big deal anyway. But the other benefit that I'm seeing is the iron just gets considerably cleaner. And it's quicker. So here we go again. Having a very clean iron when you solder results in a shiny, clean joint. And that's what we want. Shiny, clean joints. If after you pull the iron away, your joint looks dull or chalky, then that's what I call a dry joint. Well, it's not what I call a dry joint. That's what's called a dry joint. And it's not a good thing. And it will fail eventually. Might fail the next day. Might fail a couple years later. See, now there's a single wipe with the sponge, and it looked okay. All right, I'm going to trim these tails off here, and then we'll come back, and capacitors are next. Got the capacitors in place in the board. Now we'll solder those in. And this time, instead of going back and forth between the sponge and the tip cleaner, I'm going to do all tip cleaner. And then next time, when I come back for the final part, we'll do all sponge, and we'll see which one works better. So while I'm doing this, let's talk about just a couple of hints for soldering. I already told you, you got to have a clean tip. So you don't have to do it every joint, but every couple of joints at least. Make sure you keep your tip clean. Of course, never put solder on the iron and blob it onto the joint. Heat the joint with the iron. Bring in the solder. Let it flow. Leaving the iron on for a couple seconds, then take it off. You want your joint to look like a shiny, concave mountain. And you don't... I'm touching the iron to both the joint and the component's leg, but you don't want to try and touch the solder to the iron. You should just, it's going to happen, but you shouldn't be trying to make it happen. You just want to touch the solder to the pad, because once the pad is heated up, the capillary action will just pull the solder where it needs to go. But if you do touch the iron, don't worry about it. It happens. Just make sure your joints are shiny and they look like little concave mountains. If they look like an apple or a ball, then the solder hasn't adhered properly and it's not a good joint. All right, I'm going to cut these legs off and we're going to go to the final components. Generally I solder the ICs in last, but let's do this one right now, just so I can use the sponge on it and see how it's going to behave. This is, of course, the 555 timer, which, if you guys know me at all, you know that in my opinion it is probably the greatest IC ever invented. A little piece of tape to hold it in place. Okay, so here's the tip which I cleaned the last time in the Hakko tip cleaner, and it looks fabulous. All right, so let's do this. Make sure the solder flows over the entire pad. That's more for mechanical stability than electrical continuity, but it's just what's considered good practice. All right, we'll give her a wipe here. This zigzag soldering method is my own personal thing for trying to dissipate the heat in ICs as best as possible. So then we're going to wipe with the sponge here. And it is clean. I use the sponge all the time. It works quite well. Okay, we can take off our our tape. And we've got a couple of transistors and a couple of LEDs. Okay, LEDs, we'll put them in. Long leg is the positive side, of course. If you put them in backwards, no es bueno, it won't work. Now I got to look at the transistors to see if they're the same or if they're different. One moment. Transistors are the same. They're 3904s, NPNs. It's got a little bendy going there. They don't have to be perfectly flush on the board. And for any component that's going to radiate a little bit of thermal energy, I like to leave them up just a little bit proud. Not much, just a little bit. And in my experience, that simply allows them to have some airflow around them. That's not something that is in the textbooks. That's just something from 30 years of experience. All right, we'll be back to cleaning with the Hakko brass wool tip cleaner here. Again, on these transistors, I'm going to solder one leg of each one. Then I'll clean my tip, because again, clean tip important. And also, that gives those transistors time to cool down. Transistors and diodes are very susceptible to thermal damage. So do another leg here. And another leg here. Then I'll clean my tip again. And finally, we'll solder the bases of our transistors. And we'll clean. And it looks really good. All right, I'm going to cut these legs off, and we'll get back to the volume and the last couple things. All right, the volume potentiometer is in. These are some big pads, so take an extra little bit of solder for them. And the last one. And then the battery connections. This time sponge wipe. See, it didn't come quite as clean as the wool. All right, I think we're about ready other than the speaker. Well, there she is. Nice European sounding alarm. Everything works well. And the tip, let me, so I can get it to focus here. Well, first we'll focus on my hand, and we'll bring the tip in where my hand was. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but it's clean. And I think I like the brass wool stuff. It produces the same amount of cleanliness, as far as I can tell, as the sponge. But it's quicker to use. It doesn't require me to get any water. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I always put a little solder on the tip of my iron before I put it away. So yeah, I think I'm a convert. I'll add these to my store. You guys can get them if you want. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Feel free to comment. share, and don't forget to subscribe. That's it. I'm out because it sounds like the bobbies are coming. Peace.